Christopher Reeve was being wheeled into surgery, paralyzed from the neck down, facing a procedure that had a 50% chance of killing him. The last thing he saw before the anesthesia took him was a man in surgical scrubs and a fake Russian accent saying, "Hello, I am your proctologist." It was Robin Williams, and that moment saved Christopher's life. May 27th, 1995. Christopher Reeve, the man the world knew as Superman, lay in a hospital bed at the University of Virginia Medical Center, unable to move anything below his neck. 3 days earlier, he'd been thrown from his horse during an equestrian competition. His first and second vertebrae were shattered. The doctors gave him a 50-50 chance of surviving the surgery needed to reattach his skull to his spine. But the physical injuries weren't what was killing Christopher. It was the despair. In the 72 hours since the accident, Christopher had gone from being one of Hollywood's most physically capable actors to a man who couldn't breathe without a machine. He couldn't hug his children. He couldn't hold his wife's hand. He couldn't even scratch his own nose. 2 days before the surgery, Christopher had asked his wife Dana to bring him a pen and paper. He couldn't write. His hands didn't work, so he dictated a message. "Maybe we should let me go." Dana had broken down crying. Their 3 children were outside the room, and Christopher Reeve, at 42 years old, wanted to die. The night before the surgery, someone made a phone call to Los Angeles.
Robin Williams was on a film set when he got the call. The moment his assistant whispered, "It's about Christopher," Robin dropped everything. He told the director he had a family emergency, walked off set, and got on the next flight to Virginia. Robin and Christopher had met 22 years earlier at Juilliard. They'd been assigned as roommates, 2 wildly different personalities thrown together in one of America's most prestigious acting programs. Christopher was tall, classically handsome, and disciplined. Robin was manic, unpredictable, constantly improvising. They should have hated each other. Instead, they became inseparable. When Robin arrived at the University of Virginia Medical Center on the morning of May 27th, he didn't go through normal visitor procedures. He somehow convinced the hospital staff to give him surgical scrubs, a mask, and a cap. Then he walked directly into Christopher's pre-surgery room like he belonged there. Christopher was lying on the gurney, IV lines running into his arms, an oxygen mask over his face. His eyes were closed. Dana was holding his hand. The anesthesiologist was prepping medications. Nurses were checking monitors. The atmosphere was grim. Everyone in that room knew this might be the last time they saw Christopher Reeve alive. That's when Robin walked in. He didn't announce himself. He just stepped up to Christopher's gurney, leaned over so his face was directly above Christopher's, and said in a thick, completely ridiculous Russian accent, "Hello, I am your proctologist, and I will be performing your rectal examination today." Christopher's eyes snapped open. For a moment, he couldn't process what he was seeing. The surgical mask obscured most of the face, but the eyes, those manic, sparkling eyes, were unmistakable. "Robin?" Christopher's voice was barely a whisper through the oxygen mask. "Yes, yes," Robin continued in the fake Russian accent, gesturing wildly. "I am Dr. Yevgeny Pushkin, and I specialize in very thorough examinations. Very, very thorough. We will be here for many hours." And then Christopher Reeve did something that nobody in that room expected. He laughed. It wasn't much of a laugh. He barely had the lung capacity for it, but it was real. For the first time since the accident, Christopher Reeve laughed. Dana started crying. The nurses looked at each other in shock. The anesthesiologist actually stopped preparing the medications for a moment, stunned by what he was witnessing. Robin pulled down his surgical mask, revealing his full face, grinning that huge Robin Williams grin. "Hey, buddy," he said, his voice now completely normal. "I heard you were feeling a little down. Thought you could use a visit from your proctologist." "You're insane," Christopher whispered, still smiling. "And you're about to have surgery," Robin said, his tone shifting, becoming more serious, but still warm.
which means you don't have time for a pity party. You've got to get through this operation, and then you've got to get better, because I need someone to make me look good at award shows." Christopher's smile faded slightly. "Robin, I can't move. I can't do anything." Robin grabbed a stool and sat down next to the gurney, ignoring the medical staff who were trying to signal that they needed to start the procedure. "Here's what you can do," Robin said firmly. "You can survive this surgery. That's step one. And then, once you survive it, we'll figure out the rest together. But right now, today, all you have to do is make it through the next few hours. Can you do that? For Dana? For you kids? For me?" Christopher's eyes filled with tears. "I'm scared."
"Of course you're scared," Robin said. "You'd be an idiot not to be scared. But you're Christopher Reeve. You're Superman. And I don't mean that in the corny way. I mean, you're the guy who does things that seem impossible. This is just another impossible thing. And you're going to do it." The anesthesiologist cleared his throat. "Mr. Williams, we really need to begin." Robin nodded, but he didn't move. Instead, he leaned in close to Christopher and whispered something that only Christopher could hear. Years later, Dana Reeve would reveal what Robin said in that moment. "You're gonna get through this. And when you wake up, I'm gonna be right here, probably still in these scrubs, and I'm gonna tell you the most inappropriate joke you've ever heard. So you have to wake up, because you're not gonna want to miss it." Christopher closed his eyes and nodded. Robin stood up, squeezed Christopher's shoulder, one of the few places Christopher could still feel sensation, and stepped back to let the medical team work. As they began administering the anesthesia, the last thing Christopher saw before losing consciousness was Robin Williams standing in the corner of the room, still wearing the surgical scrubs, giving him a thumbs up. That moment, that single moment of laughter in the darkest time of Christopher's life, was the turning point. Later, Christopher would say that Robin's surprise visit gave him a reason to fight. It reminded him that life could still hold joy, even in impossible circumstances. The surgery lasted 7 hours. It was successful, but just barely. Christopher survived, but he would never walk again. He would spend the rest of his life on a ventilator, confined to a wheelchair. True to his word, Robin was there when Christopher woke up. And he did tell him an inappropriate joke, something so raunchy that Christopher later said he couldn't repeat it, but it made him laugh so hard that the nurses thought something was wrong with his ventilator. What the public didn't know, what nobody knew except the people closest to them, was that Robin's visit wasn't a one-time thing. It became a pattern that would continue for the next 9 years, until Christopher's death in 2004. Every single month, without fail, Robin would visit Christopher. Sometimes it was at Christopher's home in New York. Sometimes it was at rehabilitation centers. Sometimes it was just a phone call that lasted 3 hours. But Robin never missed a month. He didn't tell reporters about these visits. He didn't mention them in interviews. When asked about Christopher, Robin would say something generic like, "He's my friend, and he's doing great," and then change the subject. But behind the scenes, Robin Williams became one of the most important people in Christopher Reeve's recovery and survival. Christopher's life after the accident was brutally difficult. The ventilator was uncomfortable, the wheelchair was limiting, the constant physical therapy was painful. The loss of independence was crushing. There were days when Christopher fell back into that dark place he'd been in before the surgery. On those days, Robin would show up. Sometimes he'd arrive unannounced, just walk into Christopher's house and start doing characters. He'd spend hours entertaining not just Christopher, but Dana and the kids too. He'd make them all laugh until they forgot, for a little while, how hard everything was. Other times, Robin would call in the middle of the night. Christopher often couldn't sleep. The ventilator made it difficult, so Robin would stay on the phone with him for hours, talking about movies they wanted to make, stupid things they'd done when they were young, memories from Juilliard.
Robin also did something else that very few people knew about. He paid bills. Christopher's medical expenses were astronomical. The specialized equipment, the round-the-clock care, the modifications to make the house accessible, it all added up to millions of dollars. Robin quietly, without telling Christopher, started covering costs. He'd call Christopher's accountant and ask what bills were overdue, then he'd pay them anonymously. When Christopher needed a new wheelchair and insurance denied the claim, Robin bought it and had it delivered with a note that said, "From an anonymous Superman fan."
Christopher found out about some of this years later and was furious. He told Robin he didn't need charity. Robin's response was simple. "It's not charity. It's friendship. You do the same for me. This is just paying back the favor." But the money wasn't the most important thing Robin gave Christopher. The most important thing was hope. After the accident, Christopher became an advocate for spinal cord injury research. He started a foundation. He lobbied Congress. He gave speeches about stem cell research. He became a different kind of Superman. Not the fictional character who could fly, but a real man who refused to give up. Robin supported all of it. He performed at Christopher's fundraisers for free. He made phone calls to wealthy donors. He used his celebrity to bring attention to spinal cord research. When Christopher testified before Congress, Robin sat in the audience, visible to the cameras, lending his famous face to Christopher's cause. In 1999, Christopher was hospitalized with a severe infection. He was in intense pain, depressed, and starting to lose hope again. Robin flew to New York, went directly to the hospital, and performed a one-man show in Christopher's hospital room. For 2 hours, Robin did every character he'd ever created. He did voices, impressions, physical comedy. He made the nurses laugh so hard that other patients could hear it down the hallway. When he was finally exhausted, Robin collapsed in a chair next to Christopher's bed. "You know what your problem is?" Robin said, breathing hard. "What?" Christopher asked. "You keep forgetting that you're not alone," Robin said. "You've got Dana, you've got your kids, you've got me. Stop trying to carry all this by yourself." Christopher smiled. "You're right." "Of course I'm right," Robin said. "I'm always right, except when I'm wrong, which is most of the time. But this time, I'm right." On October 10, 2004, Christopher Reeve died from heart failure caused by an infection. He was 52 years old. He'd survived 9 years longer than many doctors predicted, 9 years that were filled with love, advocacy, hope, and the friendship of a man who refused to let him give up. Robin Williams was devastated. He didn't speak publicly about Christopher's death for weeks. When he finally did an interview, he broke down crying on camera. "He was my brother," Robin said. "Not by blood, but by choice. And that's even stronger. We chose each other. Back at Juilliard, we chose to be friends. And then for 31 years, we kept choosing each other, over and over again." The interviewer asked Robin what he'd miss most about Christopher. "His courage," Robin said immediately. "People think of courage as this big, dramatic thing. But Christopher showed me that real courage is getting up every single day when your body won't cooperate, when you're in pain, and still choosing to find joy, still choosing to laugh, still choosing to make the world better." Robin paused, wiping his eyes. "He taught me what it means to be truly strong," Robin continued. "And the crazy thing is, I think he thought I was the one helping him. But really, he was helping me. Every time I visited him, every time I made him laugh, I was the one who left feeling better." After Christopher's death, Robin became even more involved in spinal cord injury research. He joined the board of the Christopher and Dana Reeve Foundation. He continued doing fundraisers. He testified before Congress himself, sharing stories about his friend. In 2012, during one of these testimonies, Robin said something that captured the essence of his friendship with Christopher. "Christopher used to joke that I was his proctologist.
It was this dumb bit I did before his surgery. But in a weird way, that joke was true. A real friend is someone who's willing to look at the parts of you that are...
The letter said, in part, "You saved my life in that hospital room. Not because you made me laugh, though you did, but because you reminded me that I was still me, that paralysis could take my body but not my spirit, that I was still worth loving, still capable of joy. You gave me permission to survive, and then you stuck around to make sure I did. I will never be able to repay that gift, but I promise to pay it forward. Thank you for being my friend. Thank you for never giving up on me. Thank you for showing me what love looks like when it's real." The friendship between Robin Williams and Christopher Reeve wasn't a Hollywood story. It wasn't about fame or publicity. It was about two men who met when they were young and unknown, who built a bond that survived everything life threw at them, and who showed up for each other in the moments that mattered most. Robin didn't visit Christopher for photo opportunities. He visited because that's what friends do. He made Christopher laugh not to prove he was a good person, but because he knew laughter was the one thing that could cut through pain and despair. Their friendship reminds us that the most profound relationships aren't always the ones that look impressive from the outside. They're the ones where someone shows up in surgical scrubs with a terrible Russian accent when you're facing death. They're the ones where someone calls you at 3 a.m. because they know you can't sleep. They're the ones where someone quietly pays your bills and never mentions it. They're the ones where someone looks at you, paralyzed, broken, hopeless, and says, "You're gonna get through this, and I'm gonna be right here." Robin Williams gave Christopher Reeve 9 extra years of life, not through medicine or money, though those helped, but through... And Christopher gave Robin something equally important. He showed Robin what it means to be truly courageous, to face impossible circumstances with grace, to turn personal tragedy into a mission to help others. They saved each other over and over again for 31 years. That's what real friendship looks like. Not perfect, not always easy, but absolutely unbreakable. And it started with a fake Russian accent and a joke about a proctologist in a hospital room on the day when Christopher Reeve decided to live.